Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Stoke Meter. Today's guest comes from the land down under, right there in Australia. And what a privilege it is to have Alex Thomas on the show. Alex and I were introduced by a good buddy of ours, and Chrysanthi. Again, you'll hear Chrysanthi watch us a lot, but she said you got to talk to Alex Thomas because she's doing some pretty cool things down there in Australia. And Alex is the director, principal, and founder of Alex Thomas Party Limited, as well as she's laughing because she goes, but she also runs an organization called Plant a Seed for Safety. And we'll get into that because it highlights the importance of safety on our farms, something that we typically don't hear. And there's a lot of correlation between safety on farms in Australia, safety on farms in the States, and wherever it might be. So Alex, welcome to our show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Maurice. It's great to be here.
Oh, boy. And I'll tell you what, every time I hear an Australian accent, I just smile because some of the happiest moments that I've ever had are with my friends from down under.
It's an amazing place. I'm literally looking out my window and the sun's coming up and it's going to be a beautiful summer's day down here.
Yes. And it's so funny because we're going from winter into spring and you folks are going from autumn into summer. No. How it goes into, it's an opposite cycle.
Yeah, it's about to get cold.
It is indeed. Well, we've got to go straight into what you do. When I was hearing about Plant a Seed for Safety, I wanted to understand a little bit more because I grew up on a farm. We discussed this. I grew up on a farm, and I remember sometimes there were some things that we just did, but they might not have been the most safe things. And then I was reading a background of how this whole thing started with you. And I'm just wondering if you can actually give us a background of how this began, what was the catalyst for it, and what you folks are doing now.
No worries. So I had the most idyllic childhood you could ever possibly ask for. I grew up on what we call it a sheep station, which I guess is, the equivalent of a ranch or a farm in the States. And essentially it's just a big farm. And in the middle of nowhere in sort of pastoral northeast South Australia, so a notoriously dry part of the world, and little to no rain every year, which obviously has its challenges. Came into the world up there, and mum and dad had taken over this sheep station, and dad had traditionally come from a farming area in South Australia, which was sort of more broadacre cropping and sheep, which is considerably easier to run, into the pastoral zone, which is really all just sheep and a lot more land, but you need a lot more land to cater for sheep, per head per acre type thing. So grew up there, and we got hit by some terrible droughts in the early 80s, so about 3 years after dad had taken the station over. And so I wasn't around at that point, but he went through the throes of having to shoot animals and stuff like that. And it was dreadful. And so he diversified our income by mustering feral goats, which were particularly problematic at the time. And people hadn't really understood how lucrative it could be to muster feral goats. So mum and dad were running the station, and then dad was going off for sort of weeks at a time to other parts of the state and the country to get these feral goats. And then he came down with this nasty livestock-borne virus called Q fever. And then further to that, Q fever is something that's carried inside dirt. It runs in, sort of urine and feces and placenta and stuff. So you could be working in, the sheep yards and you could be breathing in this stuff all the time. And nasty business. So caught this thing called Q fever. And again, I wasn't around at this point, but Dad tells stories of, you know, kind of going into his bedroom, not coming out for 3 weeks, and you know, like the skin peeling off his hands, like just a rotten thing to have. Yeah. And then that sort of put an enormous amount of pressure on his organs. And that was kind of the start of his, you know, his health, the deterioration of his health throughout the course of his life. So he then got Ross River virus, which is a mosquito-borne virus. Do you have that in the States?
No, I don't even know. I don't even know about the Ross River, but wow, yeah.
Yeah, no, don't come to Australia. You'll get sick and die. He's still alive. So yeah, Q fever, Ross River virus. We had that really awful drought, and then he got diabetes, and then, you know, we got hit with the drought of the 90s, and at this stage I was still around, and he's just burning the midnight oil. Like I can only assume that the farmers in the States are, you know, similar in that sense. And so diabetes, then he got heart failure and kidney failure, and the sort of compounding impact of the droughts and, you know, really trying to make ends meet. And then, of course, you know, Mum and Dad unfortunately split up, and then had to sell the sheep station. And again, you know, there's this real pride associated with particularly Australian blokes who've been on the land their entire life. And this was he was a 5th generation farmer. So yeah, and then heart failure, kidney failure, some amputations and various other nasties, and then he ended up permanently disabled at the age of 56. So I mean, the long and short of it, the catalyst for plantar safety has really been that, you know, progression of events over the last 30 or so years. And I've played a key role in caring for him since I was around 15. Yeah. And so, and, you know, he's my superhero, my dad. So, yeah, I mean, I've got this, we obviously don't have the sheep station anymore. We had to sell that. And I've got such a profound sense of, I guess, identity with my childhood. And I just, you know, I like to think that I'm not living in the past, but that affinity is so strong, I don't want to let it go. Sure. So, you know, plantar safety is a product really of that story and that journey. And it's about putting health and safety front of mind for our farmers and for our rural communities to make sure that they get home to their families at the end of each day, no matter what life throws at them.
Wowsy. Well, and that, what I would say a grand purpose to do, because one of the things that I keep on coming back to, at least when I'm visiting with my farmer buddies, so I've not only farmers, but I've looked at ranches as well. Former client was a gigantic processing place for cattle. I don't believe that a lot of folks understand how vital it is that farmers are in good shape, because when you look at the mass amounts of people that they feed. For instance, I was talking about my brother-in-law that farms in Oregon, and thousands of acres. They have so many crops that go all over the nation and then subsequently all over the world. As a matter of fact, there was someone that came to look at their hay or alfalfa. I guess this is how non-educated I am when it comes down to these things, but looking for a particular feed for a Saudi prince's horses. And this was in the States. It's just, wow. I just go over there and I just look at what they're doing. And I'm amazed at how many, not only people they impact, but the animals and everything else. And so the fact that safety is still kind of a topsy-turvy in the farming community is nuts. And I'm just, what have you seen as far as people you've reached out to? What are some of the impacts that you're trying to have as far as safety is concerned?
Look, in terms of what I've seen, you know, I'm not the only young person to, you know, having to be in this position, you know, where I'm gravely concerned for the health and or safety of a parent. And unfortunately, it's, it's a classic case of our strength through adversity becoming one of our greatest challenges in a way. And like in rural industries and communities in Australia, at least, it's predominantly small family businesses. So to your point, it's one or two people holding the show together. And the industry is notorious for placing a lot of emphasis and importance on seeds and weeds and wool and everything that's sort of you can easily attribute to productivity, but we don't talk about the health and safety of people. It's just not on the agenda. And so because we are an industry of lots and lots of small family businesses, each one of those small family businesses has their own CEO.
Yeah.
And so it's not like we have a big corporate health and wellbeing program that's going to resource this conversation.
Right.
The influence, the capacity to influence change is far more of a sociological thing than it is about organizational change, so to speak. So it requires a completely different lens. And and by contrast, like rural communities are so resilient and they really care for their people. Like you could have a CEO of an organization with 10,000 people in it and people become a number.
Yes.
But rural communities just aren't like that. So there's an opportunity to scale up the conversation, scale up the care factor inside rural communities in a way that makes sense to rural communities, and just sort of shake the narrative up and just give people the tools or inspire people to have these conversations that will get people home safely at the end of each day. So the change that I want to have is really just to, to turn up the volume on this conversation and to put it front and center and make, so that we're taking a more holistic view of what it means to be a sustainable industry and to have sustainable communities, because it can't just be about the bottom line all the time. It just doesn't work, because if our people break, then the industry breaks, the community breaks, and then we have a real problem on our hands. Yeah.
And you brought up another thing on numbers. Corporate entities are obsessed with numbers,
Yes.
numbers, right? I've been speaking with doctors, and it's interesting to see how when people come in by numbers and how much money is made or how many patients you've seen, it takes away from the care of people, because the emphasis is the number. And I love what you're saying here, because there was something that I had read that there's people behind those numbers. Have we talked about those people behind those numbers and understanding how we impact those people behind the numbers? I couldn't help but apply it to some of the opportunities that I've had to be on a farm myself as a youth, and then subsequently recently because of extended family on farms in Oregon, to see how much of a community it really is when you're a farmer. Even you brought up different CEOs of different farms. What's amazing to see though is my brother-in-law, he's like this social king over there, and he'll call anybody and they problem solve together. And it becomes very unique at how they solve different things, how people come together, how the farmers come together when they're in the midst of all types of things. Right now, it's a drought that we're talking about here, and how they'll get together and talk about how they're going to face this adversity together. So the numbers say we're a certain number of gallons per whatever it is. Again, I'm such a novice at this, and there's a certain amount of water. But going back to a long way to go back to your original point, is that there are people behind those numbers. And are we recognizing how they're coming together? Are we recognizing what, to your point, bringing them back safe and well at the end of each day? Sorry for that run around, but you got me thinking.
No, you made a brilliant point. And so, I guess the other hat that I wear is as a work health and safety consultant for my own business. And we're constantly talking in that corporate setting about how we measure our success. And, the emerging evidence from safety science is telling us we can't measure our success by, through lag indicators and how many people we did or didn't kill, like it's just such a primitive way to look at this. Like, safety is a conversation, it's a narrative, it's
Right.
qualitative data, not quantitative data. So the better we get at looking at, how we collaborate and what the conversation looks like and how often the conversation is happening. And, like, as you say, farmers are incredibly resilient and adaptive and collaborative, and innovative. And I think they, sometimes it doesn't necessarily look like that from the outset, but we're so nimble, we're so agile, in the face of adversity. So it's one of our greatest strengths. And I think that story needs to be told more often.
Most definitely. I need to ask you then. One of my favorite words is adaptability. It has to be. And we live in, I'll go back to the word that we used earlier again, checklist. There's so many checklists out there. There's so many processes and procedures. Yes, they're great to follow. Yes, they're necessary. There's no doubt about it. There's no knock on that at all. What do you do when someone gets stifled in that, like this? They become so tunnel vision that they can't break out of that mode. And how do you influence them?
Yeah. Wow. What a great question. I mean, this is a really profound challenge that the entire work health and safety profession is trying to navigate at the moment. So there's kind of like the old school traditional bureaucratic approach to work health and safety, and then there's the new view. It's actually called the new view, which is lends itself more to the psychology and sociology of safety, and the concept that really, like, if 99% of the time things go well. So rather than defining safety around, the minutiae of time where something goes wrong and studying that to within an inch of its life, let's look at work has done well and go. And this is not me, actually. This is a professor, Eric Holnagel, who came up with this concept. And it's remarkable, but it's a huge, huge mindset change to go from what's not working well to what's working well. And to step right away from the sort of the policies and the procedures and the box ticking. And that's part of, I love this part of my work, because it's just, it provides people with permission to exercise their capacity to navigate change and to demonstrate autonomy and to be fluid and to adapt to their environment. Because the false economy that a policy or procedure provides in prescribing that work is done the same way every single day, as if we're all standing in, like a factory or something, and no variables whatsoever, which is impossible because of the complexity and the nature of people in and of itself. How do you change it? I think you've got to start with the conversation. It's a journey, but I mean, some people are just not there yet. They're not ready to have that conversation, but there are lots of people who are ready to have that conversation. And I guess it's about really refining who that demographic is, and just starting the conversation. Hey, do you want to rethink policies, procedures, and paperwork and do things differently? Sure. I think there's this classic assumption that work health and safety has to be boring because of that old stereotype. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, like, to me, saving lives is the most inspiring thing ever. Like, what could you possibly want to do? It's just crazy. The storytelling, I think, is a really powerful, and plenty about storytelling, Maurice. Like, it's a really good way to captivate people and
storytelling is a big deal. And I had to laugh because you had mentioned, hey, why don't we come together and brainstorm about policies and procedure? I'd rather go to the dentist and get my root canal.
I know. And that was such a, God, like, really early in my career, like when Dad left the station, I, was meant to go to university, and, much to my parents' disgust, I didn't go. I sort of followed Dad to I went and worked on a sheep station for a while, and then went to the mining industry, which is where I cut my teeth in the work health and safety space. And I just was watching my dad, who'd been a farmer his whole life, immerse himself in this environment which was so wedded to this rigid, paper-driven way of being. And you can imagine his response. And there were 2 entry-level jobs for women in mining in those days. It was either admin or safety. So I jumped in, and I was like, something's not right here. Like, there's this enormous nexus between what safety really is all about, like
Right.
saving lives, versus how it plays out in this context. So it's awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I have to ask this. How do you get people involved? How do you get them so-called stoked to talk about these things? You pivot, and now you pivoted to how it relates to safety, but there's something very innate in you that gets people excited. In our initial conversations, I couldn't help but just smile. I was just smiling. And we were talking about all kinds of different things. And it wasn't just about our stories. It was really about what you did or do. And then in the way that you do it, I couldn't help but think, wow, that is really cool. So how do you get that? Wow, this is really cool way to engage people when you're talking about things like this? Because quite frankly, there's a lot of people pushing the stuff that, and you're not even pushing it. That's a beauty of it. You kind of make it like it's not a trap is the wrong word. You make it very
totally trap.
You make it very enticing in the way that presents it. So here's how I felt. It feels like there's true benefit to me in that. So how do you make that bridge when there are those differing opinions? And I know you've answered it in part, but approach me like we're going to talk about processes and procedures, and I'm just this is stodgy
individual. Oh man. Well, I think, to be honest, it starts with the fact that I love my job. So I'm not looking to be a dirty salesperson or anything like that, and try and, like, if somebody doesn't want what I'm talking to, I'm totally cool with that. And I'm excited. Like, it's meaningful work. I'm so incredibly fortunate to know that this is what my purpose is. And perhaps there's something infectious about that. I don't know, but I'm a big believer in, you got to bring the energy, man. You got to you got to create a space for people to feel comfortable. And I think, perhaps you'd be better off asking the people I work with what it is that makes them want to do things differently. But understand, really, 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 I just love people, and I'm intensely curious to understand what's going well or not going well for them, and then sort of pivoting, to use your expression, from there. But everything that I do, and this is the boring technical stuff, but all the stuff that I have done and learned intuitively over time, I'm now realizing is actually well grounded in research. And so that's pretty cool. It's really, really cool, really validating, actually, to know that that's the case. But it all starts with a conversation. And I think if you've got 2 people who are fundamentally aligned to the goal of getting people home safely at the end of each day, then the sky's the limit. So yeah.
Fabulous. Well, I'm not sure if you're aware of it or not, but you did ask 2 questions, or you do ask 2 questions that coaches use all the time. And this is both from an athletic sense of coaching as well as leadership coaching. Two of the thought-provoking questions they always ask are, what's working well? What needs improvement? And it's amazing how that is very disarming. It really is very disarming. And your personality, I can already tell, it's one of those things, it's very disarming, and you have that ability to put in those wonderful types of bits of information that they can chew on and really start to think of how it can apply to their farm or whatever it might be that you're discussing with them. So Yeah, you really are really sneaky in that.
Oh,
And
thanks,
I wouldn't say purposely sneaky as much as, wow, I just got Alexed.
mate. Yeah. Oh, look, like it's it's not about me. It's none of what I do is about me. It's about whoever I'm working with at the time, and they can only be the expert in whatever there it is they're going through, or whatever's happening within their business. And I think I learned that super early on in safety world, and I think coupled with the curiosity, and I'm an eternal empath, which is great but
Yes.
challenging sometimes. um, it's magic. I love it. I love it.
It sure is. Well, another thing that I've noticed too, it's obvious, is you are in a very uh interesting situation, in that you're a trailblazer. And I remember when Krisathi said, hey, she is doing some amazing things, and something that is a very male dominated type of arena. And
Mm.
anytime you break into that arena, it can be very, very hard at times, because there's a so-called perceived angle. I don't see that angle in you at all. I just see this, again, this relationship building that is it's something that will take the individuals that you're working with in a direction that is positive for all involved, rather than just being someone breaking the glass ceiling. And I appreciate that. Just it's amazing to see.
Oh, thanks, Maurice.
Eh,
Jeez, mate. I'm not going to be able to fit through the door frame on the way out of this conversation.
Well, I've got to. Well, and what made me think of that is I saw something on your LinkedIn that said, blokes that break the bias.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. That was an experiment. Yeah.
Yeah. So explain to me, what is that, blokes that break the bias?
Oh, well, I mean, so International Women's Day was last week, and I've got mixed views around that. And, like part of Planet C for Safety has this really strong focus on rural women, because they're already leading this conversation about health and safety. And so part of Planet C for Safety is really about empowering them to continue talking about it, and to have more inclusive conversations about it, and to really showcase their voices, I suppose, because they are key influencers within rural communities and within their businesses and so on and so forth. And anyway, so last week I thought, well, what am I going to do about International Women's Day? And, like everyone, I'm on my own journey in understanding and unpicking my own biases, particularly as, initially someone that came off the land and who thought that I had to man up in order to be effective in whatever role I was serving. And it wasn't until I did some study and, learned more about adaptive leadership and bias and, discriminate, all that stuff, that I was like, wow, I really need to do some work here. And anyway, so blokes who break the bias. So I just thought, you know what, like it's not just women that have to be a part of this conversation. And every International Women's Day, I see a lot of women carrying this conversation and hosting events and speaking and potentially not getting paid. And I thought, well, how cool would it be to showcase what good looks like from the other 50% of the equation? So that was the idea. And it wasn't taking the microphone away from women on International Women's Day. It was just about providing a platform to get blokes involved in this and to provide a safe space for them to do it. Because I think sometimes amidst the noise, it can be a bit of a terrifying topic. And it's a real shame that that's the case. So I thought, yeah, bugger it. Let's run an experiment.
That is great. I love that. I love it. And you made again another safe environment for people to gear toward. And I love the way that you convey that positivity to all involved. There's no, it's just that I'm going over and over and over again. I cannot help but feel you're just you. You're sharing complete you. There's no type of thing that you're trying to push down my throat, and it's so wonderful to see. So I appreciate that, and I love the fact that you continue to make that difference in what you're doing. So that of course lends itself to another question. Where do you see plant seed for safety moving forward? What do you see in the next few years?
Moving forwards. I'm so excited about it. It's amazing. I've got a great advisory board, and I have to give a shout out to James McGill and Sarah Prime, who are on that advisory board. They're like my brains trust, and they help me avoid going down rabbit warrens and chasing too many shiny things when I have got, sub-zero time to be committing to any of that stuff. But look, it's, Planter Seed for Safety started out with this online platform of, really showcasing the stories of rural women and how they were leading the conversation about health and safety. And it's got social media platforms attached to that. And so I guess the next step is the trialing of this pilot program in what's referred to as the Barossa Valley. I don't know if you know about Barossa Valley wines, but they're amazing and they're in South Australia. And it's just about taking this conversation about health and safety to the heart of rural communities. And as I said before, keeping it front and centre. So we're now running really fun, engaging, meaningful activities in schools and cricket clubs and at the pub, so, and the undertone is really centered around the storytelling, positing people in those communities as the experts, because they are, and just, getting people home safely at the end of each day. So it's got some fluidity to it in the sense that, Planter Seed for Safety is a really broad, it's a really broad catch-all, I suppose, for anything that is affecting a rural community at any given time. So, for example, it could be child safety, could be farm safety, could be mental health, could be something to do with road accidents or any number of other challenging topics according to context. So, and then, like planting sunflower seeds for safety at a primary school to really, embed it in kids' minds that this stuff is important. So we're trying and testing, and then hopefully we'll scale across the rest of South Australia, and then hopefully across Australia, and who knows, maybe the world. But this is the best thing about working for yourself, right? Because you can just, there's no failure. There's only trying.
Yes.
And just keeping things rolling.
I love what you say. It's just about trying. It really is. I keep on going back to things that I'm hearing you say. You're throwing there's so many nice little distractions right now.
Oh, good. I do that.
I didn't really even think. We're talking adults. We're talking about making a difference. As you bring these adults together, you have youth programs. I've got to ask you, what's it like working with youth, and how's the response been with the youth?
Oh, it's so refreshing working with kids. It really is. And I think their voice gets lost a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who's had kids knows that there's this wisdom that just comes through in kids. And it's so refreshing. Yeah. It's so unfettered, and they get it. They totally get it. And they're influential in their own right. There's nothing, if a child takes a colouring in competition home and there's some message around safety or care, and then they say to their parent, well, Dad, make sure you put your seatbelt on, or Mum, don't drink drive, or I don't know, like it could be any number of key messages. But I think, again, going back to the point I made earlier around, this is a social change initiative. It's not just an organisational thing. It's not just a community thing. There's so many layers within what's called the socio-ecological model, which say that, we all have to be talking the same message. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the key learnings after coming out of New Zealand, was going, hey, it's not just rural women that need to be leading the charge here, it's everybody. So it's taking a bit more of an inclusive approach, and, children and young people they have to be a part of that too.
You reminded me of something when you brought up youth, how they're just so fresh, how they just see things, and for any listeners that I might have even shared this story, forgive me, but I need to tell you this story because your green shirt is reminding me of something that my boys taught me. I have twin boys, and I've been talking about looking at the bright side of things. It's so easy to espouse it versus when you're really living sometimes. And so we were leaving one time to go to California, I believe. And we were coming onto the freeway, and we left early in the morning, and it was like wall to wall traffic. As far as you can see, it's all these red lights from everyone's brake lights going on, right? Just like, for the love. And I thought, we're not going to make time. So my first thing was, we're not going to make good time. But that's, of course, that's what I'm thinking as an adult. And I look at my boys, I go, can you believe this? Look at this. And it's saying it kind of with a degree of chagrin. My boys, they looked at me, yeah, isn't that so cool, Dad? It looks like a bunch of Christmas trees. Aww. And I thought, oh my goodness, if there was a time that I could have teared up, I kind of was. I was just like, you're just trying to hold that emotion. But when they say that you learn more from a child than you'll ever learn from anyone else, it's because it's so pure from the context it comes from. And so the fact that you're teaching youth early on, and that you're also learning from them, I have no doubt you're going to continue to make a amazing difference here, because you have that childlike nature to absorb the knowledge, but also that willingness to share it. And I can't thank you enough. Mate. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear. That's great.
Well, what is it that we can do for you? I would love whatever it might be down the road. What types of things can we help you with?
Oh, well, gosh, great. I don't know. Let's just keep in touch. Like this is fantastic. Like to be honest, like jumping on a podcast and doing something like this is just incredible. And I don't know, like I love people, I love workshops, I love public speaking. You know, if there's ever an opportunity to jump in and do something like that, that would be really cool. And get involved on social media.
Yes.
Through the Plant for Safety channels. Yeah. And let's keep the dream alive.
Let's do it to it. I can't thank you enough for your time. I really can't. This is so fun to have been able to have that conversation and such. And I know it's early in the morning. You got to make it a great day. Okay.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's just been an absolute pleasure.